Good afternoon. In this video, I would like to talk about chapter 4 of the book A Little History of the World by E.H. Gombrich. Chapter 4 is entitled Sunday, Monday, and it's all about the civilizations which grew up and existed for many thousands of years in Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia is a region in the Middle East which is made up of the land which lies between two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, and that is why it's called Mesopotamia, because in Greek those words mean middle rivers, or between the rivers, between meso, I think middle, between, and potamia means rivers. This area, as a result of those rivers, is, I think, quite fertile, or quite swampy and marshy. It became really fertile though when King Nebuchadnezzar, who lived in around 600 BC, dug great canals and irrigation systems, which meant that the land became very fertile, and that was his great feat. Although he's also remembered for his feats of war, he was the last great king in the region. Now, to put this in historical context, we can go back to around 3100 BC, so over 5,000 years ago, to trace evidence of buildings and bricks making up temples and other sorts of buildings in Mesopotamia, which means that actually this civilization may have been a bit more advanced, at least in some respects, than ancient Egyptian civilization. Then the reign of the great kings of Mesopotamia, the great civilizations, extends between around 3000 BC and 550 BC. So a good 2,500 years of civilization, not as long as Egypt, but pretty long indeed. And unlike Egypt, this was made up of multiple different tribes. It wasn't just one dynasty of kings, which was pretty constant throughout history. It was different civilizations, the greatest of which, the most important of which, are the Sumerians, the Babylonians, and the Assyrians. Now, the Babylonians and the Assyrians had respectively the greatest and the second greatest cities in the region, namely Babylon, which was the hub of the Babylonians, and Nineveh, which was the hub of the Assyrians. And what you'll see now if you go to the region are many big hills and mounds, and these are actually the remains of these great cities, which were once the greatest cities in the world. Certainly Babylon was, and the sites of great flourishing civilizations which were the first to produce legal text, law books, such as the first law book, which was the Code of Hammurabi. Hammurabi was a king who ruled in Mesopotamia in around 1700 BC and produced this legal text. And I think it was written down as everything which was written down in Mesopotamia. It was written down on clay tablets. They didn't have papyrus, they had clay, and so they inscribed writing on that in, I think, cuneiform, which means wedge-shaped, and that's because it was little incisions in the clay, each marked off with a little wedge shape. And they made these incisions in soft clay and then baked it, and that's where they stored their information, such as legal codes like the Code of Hammurabi, as well as stories like the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is an epic story. I haven't read it, but I really want to read it. I think it's a mythological story which kind of underpinned the civilization of, I think, one of the civilizations in Mesopotamia. What else did they do? They observed the heavens. They looked up at the night sky and saw that some of the stars, some of the lights that they saw in the sky were fixed, whereas some kind of moved in between the fixed lights, and they worshipped the ones which moved, which we now know not to be stars, which they thought they were, but the planets. And at that time, they observed 5 planets, and they also worshipped the sun and the moon. So that is why actually we have 7 days in the week, because they named each day of the week after the planets, one of the planets, and or the sun and the moon, which is why the names of our days of the week actually bear such a similar resemblance to names of the planets or names of the sun and moon, such as Sunday or Monday. So these really were great civilizations.